Hello! For those of you who don't know me, my name's Derek Bailey. I've been a wood turner now for over 40 years and taught for 8 of them. Over the last few months or so I've been doing instruction videos for absolute beginners who've just purchased the first lathe. The lathe that I've been demonstrating on has been a very small Axminster one, which is probably the smallest lathe on the market. And it's really for people who are on a budget, who are just toying with the idea of taking up wood turning on a serious basis. So I've done videos right through from spindle turning right through to bowl turning, and in this video I'm going to do an end grain bowl, making a jewellery box with a difference. Well, I like to think it's a different one. I've got 2 sections. We've got an inner section for the more substantial jewellery and an outer section for rings, etc. It's been a while. It's been nearly a month since I did my last video. Unfortunately, my computer went kaput and it took me over a week through various visits to the technician to get it fixed. Plus, I've been absorbed a bit in the football with the European competition. So I'm afraid it's longer than I like to usually do a video about one a week. So I'm afraid I hope I haven't let you down in that way. Anyway, that's enough waffling. I hope you like the video, so let's get on. I've pre-turned a big chunk of Burr Elm, which I've had for some years, to approximately 5-inch diameter, 120mm. I've put dimples in at both ends on centre, and now, as you can see, mounting it between centres. I've marked the thickness of a dovetail spigot I'm now going to produce with the parting off tool, ready for going into the forge-row chuck. I'm just marking the position of the 2 recesses I'm going to bore out in the end of the elm blank. I'll start off using a spindle gouge and then doing the remainder of the more precision work with screw chisels and a negative rake scraper. Notice as I'm removing the wood that the bevel is supporting the cut and always rests against the wood, and you angle the tool so that the edge comes into contact, and the sweet spot, which I illustrated in my previous videos, creates a most efficient cut. Notice how the bevel is supporting the cut, as I illustrated before. But as I come across the bottom of the board and come against the wall and pull the tool out, the bottom edge of the flute and the cutting edge of the flute creates a scraping action. So the bevel is not supporting the cut here, but I'm creating a scraping action using the lower cutting edge of the flute. And I'm doing it in one continuous movement. I'm making a small recess to guide the drill, and I'm going to use the drill to set the depth to which I'll remove the wood from inside the bowl. I've made a felt tip mark on the drill to set the depth of the recess in the bowl, so that I've got a 5mm thickness at the base of the bowl. Now that I've created a hole with the drill, it makes it a lot easier to use the spindle gouge to remove the wood for the recess depth. It's better than keep messing around trying to remove the pip in the middle of the bowl, because it tends to skid across sometimes, and it's the upward rotating part of the bowl. So it's nice to have a hole that I can just blend everything into, and it makes it a lot easier to turn anyway. After I've removed the bulk of the recesses using a spindle gouge, I'm now using a 1/2 inch wide screw chisel, which acts like a negative rake scraper, which I'll give a diagram to show exactly what I mean. Negative rake scrapers tend to produce a better finish because the cutting force, which acts at 90 degrees, is offset by 10 to 20 degrees of the actual negative rake itself, and because of that the forces are directed more through the thickness of the tool than a normal scraper would achieve, resulting in more vibration being absorbed within the tool itself. That knocking noise you heard was the tool rest hitting the inside of the bore of the blank. It's easy to make mistakes and get carried away with the turning process and just switching on the lathe before you've tested it. But I must stress, always rotate the bowl by hand before you switch the lathe on. The joys of having no cameraman. I hope my head isn't obstructing too much vision. You can actually see through my visor the cutting action. Here I tried a negative rake scraper instead of the screw chisel, and I still wasn't getting satisfactory results, so I resorted to using the bowl gouge, which is a thicker section and absorbs slightly more vibration, giving a better finish. It's good to have various tools in the woodturner's armoury because the timber changes. You can have hard spots and everything else, and sometimes the tools that you would normally expect to work sometimes don't, so you have to refer to alternative tools and techniques to achieve the finish that you're happy with. As with many timbers, especially burrs, there are plenty of fissures caused by the wavy grain, which is going in all sorts of directions and can tend to weaken the structural value of the timber so I'm filling up some of the more severe fissures to render the timber sound for the application it's being used for. I'm using 2-part resin, which is arrowdite if you like. This one, I don't know where it's from, I don't know where I got it from, but it dries in about 3-4 minutes, which is quite impressive. It's amazing how many times you plan something ahead when you're wood turning, and then as you're wood turning you realise that I could do with a bit more, and this is no exception. I've decided to increase the depth of the inside of the bowl to accept larger rings, etc. for the jewellery. Sometimes you modify your design as you go along, especially when it's one you've not done before. I've marked the maximum depth on the outside of the bowl, and now which gives me freedom to shape the bottom edge of the bowl to give a more attractive shape. As I was turning, I stopped the lathe, I noticed some chipping right at the top edge of the bowl, so I've removed some more of the top of the bowl to get rid of those chippings on the edge. Because the lid is going to be inserted into the top edge of the bowl by about 4mm, I need to reduce the inner bowl, if you like, the inner section, to accommodate this. So I'm making the inner section about 4mm below the top surface of the outside of the bowl. Off camera I parted off using a 16mm parting tool, a 10mm wide section off the original Burr Elm blank to save time. Here I've made a spigot about 4mm long that will insert into the top of the base of the jewellery box. The main thing about this procedure is to persevere, taking very small amounts. Often impatience can take over and you think, oh, I'll just take a little bit extra off, and whoop, too much. So you've got to keep persevering by taking very, very small amounts off, and don't let impatience take over the operation. Now that I've got a nice little suction fit of the lid, I'll just clean up the underside of the lid and the circumference. Time to use abrasives here. I'm starting off at 120, and working my way up to 180. Then I'll revert to Yorkshire grit, the brown, which is slightly coarser than the white, and then finish off with sanding sealer and melamine lacquer. Because Yorkshire grit is basically a paste with pumice in it, and it does slightly darken the wood, it's hard to perhaps understand when it stops working, but basically what I do is I use a tissue, and when it stops staining the tissue, or doesn't stain it too much, then that's the time when the pumice has broken down and it stops being an abrasive. Because Yorkshire grit stains the wood darker, one would think it was a polish, but it's not. So it's best to have a treatment afterwards, which is using, I use sawdust to give sanding sealer a key, then sawdust after the sanding sealer for a key for the melamine lacquer, which I put 2 coats on, and again using the sawdust in between coats. Here I forgot myself for a minute and I sanded the inside of the largest recess, which caused the lid not to fit properly. So it's a case of re-establishing the good fit I had before. I noticed a little bit of torn grain on the outer surface of the base, so I did a bit of shear scraping using the bowl gouge. Rather than use araldite again, because the structure of the base wasn't compromised by some of the fissures, I filled some of the slightly bigger fissures with some soft wax from Liberon, being careful to select the colour so it complements the Burr Elm. By applying pressure on the Liberon wax, it melts it slightly and it's easy to fill the cracks, or fissures as you like, and then sand over it. Just give it a couple of minutes afterwards, just for it to re-harden again after the pressure melt, and then just treat it like the timber really, and it won't come out once you've put sanding sealer on and melamine lacquer. To get into the sharp corners of the two recesses, I've used a spray sanding sealer and a spray melamine. Due to my silliness and sanding the inside of the large bore of the base, the lid, as I said before, is no longer fitting. There's a bit of a slop on it, so I'm having to re-establish the spigot which goes into the base of the bowl, base of the jewellery box I should say. In order to do this I put a slight taper, and by trial and error I keep going until I've got the nice fit that I want. The lid doesn't want to fall off when you turn the jewellery box upside down, but it's easy to take off. It's not a deep spigot, so I've only got 4mm to play with, so it's a case of just persevering, and in no way, once you've established the fit, don't sand it, and it's better to achieve the fit from the tool rather than rely on abrasives to get the fit.
Be sure to keep them round in sight. Fight forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.
The lid is fitting the way I want it to. It's a case of now cleaning it all up, getting it polished. I'm going to turn it down so there's a small little spigot to fit horn beam finial at a later stage. I'm using a 3/8 spindle gouge here just to clean up some of the slightly torn grain that was achieved with the edge of the screw chisel. As you can see, I kept swapping between the bowl gouge and the spindle gouge to see if I could get a decent finish. It was adequate, but not how I wanted it to be, because there were still areas of slightly torn grain. So you'll see at a later stage I introduce the screw chisel and adjust the position of the tool rest after I made the small spigot ready for the finial to be glued on later. Here I'm using a 1/16 parting tool just to clean up the little spigot in the centre. I still wasn't getting the finish that I wanted on top of the lid, so I'm going to revert to a 1-inch 1-inch screw chisel to do the negative rate scraping action, so that I can flatten the lid a bit better. But in order to do this I need to support the lid so that I can get right up into the corner where the small spigot is. So I need to hold the lid in place with a pre-turned tapered scrap piece of wood. Here I've noticed some more fissures in the top of the lid, which could interfere with the structural integrity of the lid. So it's essential that I fill those fissures up with araldite, i.e. the resin, instead of using a filler wax. Now it's back to the abrasives up to 180 grit, and then the Yorkshire grit again with melamine, sanding seal and melamine as I did on the base. A little bit of nostalgia for me here, as I'm using a scrap piece of hornbeam that I've had about over 40 years from when I first started wood turning. It's coming useful for contrasting timber for the finial. Hornbeam, although very bland, is extremely lovely timber to turn. It's a very dense wood and lends itself to a lot of highly detailed carving, and is an ideal wood for doing finials with intricate designs and very, very tiny, nearly microscopic beads, etc. Yes, I really love this timber. I didn't want the finial to be too slender because it will be used quite a lot, so it could easily break. It's okay for ornamental designs where there's very little usage involved and it's more of an artistic feature. But for something like this, where it's going to be used quite a lot over the years, you want something that's a little bit more substantial and chunky to hold. I've used an old piece of pine here and turned a spigot to fit the inner recess of the jewellery box base, and used it as a kind of jam chuck. It was quite convenient and a lot easier to size up to hold the jewellery box base. When you do it, cleaning up the base of a bowl or a box, don't forget to put a slightly concave slope in the bottom. It only needs to be about 1/2 degree or 1 degree, so it sits perfectly well on a table and doesn't rock. Often with normal sanding, using abrasives, you tend to leave small rings that can be detected when the light hits the base, which aren't seen apparently, especially if you've got slightly dim lighting in the workshop, and then you take them outdoors into the light and you see slight rings. So this is why I prefer to use a multi-tool to do the sanding. It gives an unpredictable cutting action of the abrasives so that it doesn't leave rings. I'm using liquid sanding sealer and melamine. It gives a slightly thicker coat, which is more practical for something that's going to be used a lot and prevents as much wear and tear.